first of all, I'd like to welcome everyone to this presentation of Behind the Bench from the National Soccer Coaches Association of Canada. And we're honored to have a great lineup today. And we're going to talk about, playing against some of the best players in the world, some Canadians who managed to play against Pele and Georgie Best and with the Beckenbauer and against them, Johan Cruyff and a whole host of great players. And, their experience, I think, is going to help all the coaches and maybe listening to some of the stories from the past. And also we'll get their opinion on the upcoming stuff. So we have Carmine Marcantonio, Paul D'Agostino, Robert Iarusci, and hosting our session will be Alf DeBlasis. So Alf, if you'd like to take over, and we'll see you guys in about an hour.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot, John. I'm thrilled to be hosting this webinar because it kind of gives me an opportunity to relive my youth and early adulthood when I would watch the likes of these three men who are joining me today at the height of the North American Soccer League in the late 1970s and early 80s. They were very talented Canadian soccer players who competed with and against some of the game's legendary stars of that era. And years later, in the case of two of these three gentlemen, after their playing careers ended, I was fortunate enough to be joined by them frequently on televised soccer broadcasts to comment on the game as guest analysts. And I'm delighted to welcome today, on behalf of the NSCAC, former Canadian national team captain and former NASL defender Robert Iarusci, former Canadian international and former NASL midfielder Carmine Marcantonio, and former NASL player Paul D'Agostino. Gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining me today.
Alf, it's good to see you again after so long.
Good to see all three of you, and good to see that you're all safe and well. During the next hour, we'll relive some of the highlights these men experienced during their playing careers, but we'll also consider the present and the future of Canadian soccer and its place in the world game. And you can interact with myself and my three guests anytime during this event. If you'd like to ask a question or leave a comment, simply type it in the chat box, and we'll try to get to it in the next 55 to 60 minutes. So guys, you all played in an era when the eyes of the entire world were on North America. Some of the game's top stars came to play in the NASL, from one of the greatest of all time in Pelé to Cruyff, Eusebio, Beckenbauer, Chinaglia, so many more. You, if I remember correctly, you were all graduates of the Toronto Italia system and moved up through the ranks together. You all played for Canada at various times as well. I'm curious to know, what was the general impression of Canadian soccer at that time among your peers in the NASL, both your American and your international teammates? What was their sense of Canadian players and Canadian soccer in general?
Who starts?
Go ahead, Carmen.
Hey, go ahead.
Well, look, the three of us, we were fortunate to play at the time in Canadian soccer that the game was growing, especially at the semi-pro level with the national, TND. Amateur level too was very good, and we came out of a system, the Westwood young generation, that was the farm system for Toronto Italia and Toronto Azzurri that played in the TND. And, we were young enough and lucky enough to have some mentors that were mostly from Italian immigration to Canada, that were our coaches. They acted as coaches, parents, and mentors. And after playing, the three of us pretty well had the same career, because we played first in the TND with Toronto Azzurri. Then we graduated to Toronto Italia, and eventually Toronto Metro's creation, 1976. And the next thing you know, from the TND, from a youth, Westwood youth generation to playing semi-pro, and eventually in the North American Soccer League against Pelé, one of my first game. I think it was my second game, and so was Robbie, and I think Paul too. at the time was at Yankee Stadium, the Toronto Metros Croatia against the New York Cosmos, and Pelé on the other side. So we were in awe of this great. He was the one that made the NSL. He put the NSL on the map, you know.
Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Carmen was saying in terms of, I think timing had a lot to do with it too with us. I mean, I'm not sure if Carmen didn't mention the National Soccer League where Italia was playing, and that was some unbelievable soccer, believe me. I mean, some of those teams back then, you know, I don't know if you, Robin and Carmen, you agree with me, but they're almost on par with some of the MLS teams. I mean, a lot of those players were first division players from overseas that were coming here during their off season because they could make some extra money, because those countries weren't making the money they're making now. Okay, believe me, they were here, you know, from Portugal, from Spain, from wherever, Greece type of thing. You know, every team, you know, all of them, first Portuguese, you know, the Hellas, you know, they all had teams. Toronto Metros Croatia back then, Serbian White Eagles, and that soccer was unbelievable. I think it's unfortunate that a lot of people nowadays probably didn't see them because they're too young, but that was some unbelievable soccer, and I think, you know, going through that with AS Italia, and we just happened to be at the right. For me, I always think I was at the right place at the right time with Italia, the growth of the North American Soccer League, and of course the fact that there had to be 3 North Americans on the field. I think that had a lot to do with it, because you're talking, there were, you know, not too many teams had, you know, more than, well, I don't think too many teams would have had more than 3 if there wasn't a rule, because there were most of the teams are full of imports. And I think we were lucky enough to be in that sort of framework. And I think we took advantage of that you know, that we were able to play. And Carmen probably being one of the few that were midfielders. A lot of the North Americans, I'll be honest with you, were fullbacks, defenders. And then there was back then, and then there was, you know, people like Carmen, because of the skill and everything else, ended up in the midfield. There were a lot of North Americans were goalies, you know, type of thing too. But and then from there, you know, I didn't have the career that Carmen and Robbie had, but, you know, they took advantage of that, and they proved that they could play at that level with some of the best players in the world, type of thing. You know what I mean? And it was an extremely exciting time for me, I know, and I'm sure it was for I mean, they played on some excellent teams like the Cosmos in Washington and everything. And I know I went to Memphis there after Italia, and they were sort of a different budgeted team. They had a lot of English players, you know, also, and not the budget to get the you know, the best of the English players, but in Calgary, where I ended up in my last year there, that was an unbelievable team. That was a very good team with, you know, besides the 3 North Americans, with 8 Germans on the field at one time, and, you know, first division, you know, Bundesliga players, you know, and Helmut Kramers who had played on the German national team at one point, Gerd Zimmermann, Willy Reimann, Franz Gerber, who ended up being on the All-Star team. I don't know, he scored like, he came, you know, not at the beginning of the year, and next thing you know, he's got like over 20 goals in a short span. So, and they taught me a lot. They taught me a lot how to play the game the right way. Believe me, they taught me quite a bit.
Well, I agree. Yeah, I agree with you, Paul. I think when people ask me about the game today versus our game, I used to tell them that 50 years ago, we were 50 years ahead of today. And that was really because of the National Soccer League, at least in the GTA area. Those teams that we played against, Hamilton, Croatia, Serbian White Eagles, Toronto, Croatia, Pan-Hellenic, Macedonia, holy cow. I mean, every one of those games was a battle. And York Stadium in Toronto, Toronto, Italia used to get anywhere between 7,000 and 12,000 people to come out and watch us play, which was a lot in those days. And I think that we learned a lot. And as Paul said, the talent that came across to play in the National Soccer League helped us develop quickly. And then we got the opportunity, as Paul said, once again, the timing to join the Toronto Metros Croatia in 1976, which was the golden year for us, because we ended up getting Eusebio as our teammate and having him captain us to the North American Soccer League Championship game and eventually the victory when we beat Seattle 3-0. The three North American rule was important because it helped Canadians, because we were on a par with Americans. And if you looked at most clubs that had Americans and Canadians, I would bet to say that Canadians would get the nod over Americans to occupy those spots on game day. And that's why in those days, when we played in World Cup games, Canada would end up, doing very well against the United States, actually beating them on quite a few occasions, and actually doing well against Mexico. And so I think that we had a lot to be proud of back then as Canadians. And I think the foreign players who played with us and against us all started to recognize the quality of Canadian players, which really sets the groundwork for today's national program. Because if you give a Canadian athlete, a soccer player, a chance to play and a chance to absorb the knowledge through osmosis with the players on an everyday basis in a high quality practice ground, and like Alfonso Davis and Jonathan David is getting that opportunity. And there's so many more Canadians playing in Europe and across the world at high performance leagues. It's no wonder that Canada has a lot to be, look forward to with regards to finally, creating some excitement at the game at a world-class level.
Hey, Bobby, you mentioned that Toronto Metro's Croatia championship team of 1976. I want to come back to that in a minute, but because we're generally being viewed by coaches around the country, I wanted to ask you about, besides some of the top players that all three of you played with, there were some famous coaches who were attracted to the league at that time. Who were some of the names that we might recognize, and who maybe influenced you most during your career? I know you and Carmen probably played for Julio Mazzei at the Cosmos, the professor. He was called the professor. Who were some of the coaches who were the standouts at the time?
Well, okay, I'll give you a couple of my names briefly, and then I'll pass on to the other guys. But I mean, Rinus Michels was coaching. I think he was the most prominent name.
Dutch legend, yeah.
Was the legend of the Clockwork Orange Dutch team of the 70s, featuring Johan Cruyff, Johnny Rep, Johan Neeskens, Wim van Hanegem, Rudy Krol. Holy cow! Wim Serbier. So they had a tremendous team. And then he coached in LA, and he was probably the most prominent coach to come across. I mean, Eddie Fermani was our coach in
right.
New York. Eddie was a big player in England, and I know Paul played for a couple of good coaches. And then we had John Markovic here in Toronto, who, in my opinion, was the best coach I ever had. So I'll pass it on to the other guys.
Well, sorry guys, I lost the video. As I said, I'm using my Apple phone. I'm not very familiar with this Zoom thing, but
no problem. I can still hear you, Carmen. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So now to basically jump in on this, as I said, we were pioneer of what's going on today. In the late 60s, 70s. With the National Soccer League, Paul said, and also Robbie said, we had, let's call that league as a semi-professional league with some good players coming over from Greece, from Portugal. Testas played for the Portuguese, he played for Trono Italia, and a lot of other players, Dos Santos, the two brothers, Romanovic played with the Serbian. These were guys that were playing in their top leagues in Europe. And as Paul mentioned, they came over, made some extra money after their leagues ended. They came to Canada, for the summer. And that helped us with some good coaching like Fiorigi Pagliuso and then Markovic. That's what helped us to develop, playing alongside these players, having some very good coaching at the semi-pro level with Fiorigi Pagliuso, and then going on to Metros Croatia with Jarman Markovic. I was myself coached by Firmani in Montreal, that played with Sampdoria. Firmani was a South African-born player that played in the Premiership in England, and then went to play in Italy too for Inter Milan too, and Sampdoria. But I think for us as apprentice, new young Canadians, learning the game and the final points of the game came from the players themselves. I think looking every day, playing alongside Eusebio, that was the first star that we had the fortune to play with Toronto Metro's Croatia in 1976. And Eusebio captained us to win the soccer ball. And then, Cruyff, myself with Cruyff and Robbie also playing alongside with Cruyff in Washington. So we learned as apprentices, we learned from these great players, and also the coaches had a lot to do with us developing to become very good players.
You should also mention that an adopted, let's say, Canadian coach, Tony Waiters, who obviously came from England and has just unfortunately left us, and he was the president of this association, NSCAC. He also, before he took Canada to the World Cup, he took the Vancouver Whitecaps to a soccer bowl championship in 1979. So we should also, refer to some of the successes that were had. Now, Robert, you mentioned this, and everyone has kind of mentioned this 1976 championship team. And I don't know, if many of our younger viewers remember that before Toronto FC won the championship in the MLS Cup in 2017, Toronto actually celebrated the first North American soccer championship in 1976, and all three of you were on that team. I wonder if there's one story that you can share with us, because we've touched on this in discussions previously about what kind of a strange season it was. There was a coaching change. The team almost actually collapsed because there wasn't enough money, to pay the players, and yet you overcame those odds and all those obstacles to reach the final. Can you kind of describe what some of those obstacles were and what you had to overcome to get just to that point? Because you even had, in some cases, you even had the league against you in certain situations that made it difficult for you to perform.
You know what, Alf? What should have been done is actually document everything into a book, because that year itself, you could justify, based on the stories, based on the episodes, from preseason right through till that final in Seattle. It was the most incredible year, with the most incredible personalities, both on and off the field. And I'll say that. I'd like everybody to comment. Maybe I'll never forget the first time Eusebio came into the dressing room at Lamport Stadium, and I'll pass it on to Paul, because all three of us were there, and my skin is still like, still goes up, chicken skin going up, just thinking about that day when he majestically went through that door at Lamport Stadium, and it was a small little dressing room with everybody had his little hook. My hook was broken. I remember I couldn't even hang my pants on the hook. And in walks, arguably the second best player in the world. And when he walked through that door, I just looked at both Paul and Carmen, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, I'll pass it on to Paul. He can finish the story.
Well, you're right. I mean, we were just all in awe, and we were just sort of like a little kid in a candy store type of thing. It just, you don't know what to say, you don't know what to do. You just want to you don't want to make any mistakes or say the wrong thing. Never mind. That's, like you said, just in the dressing room type of thing, right? And then when you get on the field, you could just see the professional he was. And we actually got very close with him. I think the three of us, I don't know why, but it just happened naturally type of thing. I know even when he came back years later to celebrate, I remember, Robbie, the 25th, I don't think Carmen was there, the 25th anniversary with the Toronto Metro's Croatia, and we were at a function, and he was there, and then after that, we ended up going down to College Street, and because he wanted the gatonero, I think he wanted a steak and a glass of red wine type of thing, and
he wanted a Johnny Walker red,
whatever it was, something like that. I know, and so for us to, to be there at that time with this unbelievable player was just, like I said, we were just all in awe, and an unbelievable player on the field, obviously, type of thing, right? Like he just did things that even at his age with 2 bad knees or whatever, you're just unbelievable type of thing, and just going back a little bit in terms of the coaching, I think I still think Markovic was probably one of the best coaches I had. I have to reiterate what Robbie said. Markovic, I mean, he was great to us. He really believed in us, and he was we worked with the 3 of us all the time, sort of individually, to try to get us to the next level. He knew we were lacking some skills and technical aspect. And I remember in the indoor gyms, Robbie, and Carmen working on simple things like striking a ball, which you would think by now we should have been able to do, but he realized there were mistakes in our technical ability because of.
He taught me how to run, Paul. How to run. He taught me how
to run. Yeah, just some basic things, and he was probably right, because we probably never had. I mean, we had Luigi Pagliuso, great coach, and everything else, but we probably never had that level of coaching. I mean, I think he coached the Olympic team. I think he was coaching the Olympic team in back then Yugoslavia, that type of thing, and so. But yeah, and other players too. Not only the Metros Croatia, Lukacevic, and Teddy Polak. These guys were all great professionals, great players, and we learned a heck of a lot from these individuals in that year, type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, we should write a book, actually, because the time is.
Believe me, it would be a bestseller because of all the stories that you've shared with me over the years. It's
amazing because it was so long ago, and we lost some of these great players. I mean, Eusebio, we lost him a few years ago, but I want to just touch upon the grandeur, the greatness. Not just the player himself, even though he had, like Paul mentioned, 2 bad knees, and he was basically at the end of his career. But when he came here, you could still see the greatness in the football player. But amongst, he was great as a person.
Yes,
we became close friends. And this is, one of the best players in the world at the time in the 60s. With Pelé, probably was the best player in the world before after Cruyff came and then Maradona. But these are in the 60s. Eusebio La Pantera Nera, he was the Black Panther. And next thing you know, we're playing alongside this huge footballer. But what reminds me of Eusebio and the person he was, there's 2 things. One is that every time we went away to play an away game, the first calls that we got, it was Robbie and I used to be roommates. And the first call we got, as soon as we got into the room, was from Eusebio. And Eusebio wanted to say, Marcantonio, Marco, he used to call me Marco, Iarusci, 222, room 222, we must play poker. So we would have a poker game with a couple of other teammates. And he loved the game. He loved to play with us. And he was just a simple guy that shared good time with his teammates. And you don't get that now with the big players. I don't think you do. And this is, the kind of guy he was. I went to see one time when I was playing, I was coaching Woodbridge, a young team, and we went on a few games in Portugal. And I called Eusebio. I said, Eusebio, can you come and meet the team? I'm coaching, we can hear from Canada. They want to see you. They want to know you. And he was, after half an hour or so, he was there to autograph and take picture with the boys and tour the stadium with the boys. This is the kind of person he was. And, we miss him very much because every time he came to Toronto, he always would call on us, on the 3 of us. And like Paul said, we go out at the Portuguese village down the college and go to the restaurant, his favorite restaurant, and have a nice Portuguese meal with a glass of wine and just reminisce about the old times. It's something that doesn't happen on today's football, I don't think,
So if we move on, the NASL had its height, obviously, in that period of time where the 3 of you played, but eventually teams dropped out and eventually the league collapsed in 1984. That was the final year. And it wasn't until 1996 that Major League Soccer reappeared and resurfaced with a brand new league. And that league has now celebrated its 25th season, becoming the longest running North American pro soccer league. I'm curious to find out, in your opinion, what has sustained this league and allowed it to not only survive for this long, but to actually thrive with so many new expansion teams coming in. There's obviously teams in traditional markets, but so many new markets coming in every year. What has been the difference between how this league has sustained itself for so many years as opposed to the NASL that expanded so quickly and then just came crashing down a few years later?
Well,
Robbie, go ahead, Robbie. Go.
I'll give you one little angle on what I think. So the MLS started in '96, and they were rewarded by FIFA after the World Cup was in the U.S. in '94. FIFA helped them get things going again, and the MLS wanted to have an American league, not a North American league. They were very, very, very front and center with regards to their objectives and their intention that they weren't going to do what the North American Soccer League had done. Actually, I got sick and tired of hearing we're not going to make mistakes like the North American Soccer League made mistakes. As a matter of fact, their new Hall of Fame in Dallas, which I visited, has only one little area dedicated to the North American Soccer League. It's almost like our league never existed. And I say this because in 2007, 11 years after they started, and they didn't want to go to some of the great cities that the North American Soccer League were strong in, like Seattle, like in Fort Lauderdale, and I'm going to miss a few of them along the way. But anyway, they were ready to collapse. And what saved them was Toronto and later Montreal. And finally, the admission that maybe we should let Vancouver in, which had sparked Seattle coming in and Portland coming in. These cities weren't even part of their original group because MLS knew best, and they wanted to go to these second and third kind of set cities like Columbus and Kansas City, and they wanted to do it in their way. And they also had the Chivas in Southern California representing the Mexican population. Chivas being a club out of Mexico, and that didn't work out. So I'm happy that they are in their 25th year and they've done a great job. I think that they've done a good job financially in keeping expenses limited and everybody on a cap. And I think that's worked well. I think what's worked is their dedicated stadiums for each team and the amount of money that they've charged every team to enter. So the league is getting a lion's share, and then I think there's some way of everybody sharing the pie with regards to everything else that's involved in the revenues coming through. They aren't wrong when they said that the North American Soccer League made a lot of mistakes. They're not wrong. But I just think that, like anything in life, when you make good decisions, you should actually get opinions from everybody. And I think perhaps they were a little bit too full of themselves to even consider asking people that had done this before and made mistakes.
And you make a good point, Robert, because if Vancouver hadn't come along, there wouldn't be this Cascadia rivalry that we see now between Vancouver and Portland and Seattle, and there wouldn't be the Toronto and Montreal rivalry and so many others. And because that really becomes the fabric of the league, right? Is these head-to-head rivalries, the city rivals between the two Los Angeles teams or the New York teams, right? That's where the level of interest and the fan passion and interest comes in, right?
These are stronghold soccer centers of North America. It's a no-brainer. Vancouver is full stadium only because they only have 20,000 seats to sell. If they opened that stadium, they'd fill it even more on occasion. Montreal the same, Toronto the same, full stadiums, non-stop full stadiums for the time that all three of those franchises have been in the league.
Yeah, if I may interject, Robbie, I mean, you can't blame the MLS for not going to those markets from the beginning, because I think it's a business. Like I said, it was a business thing. Is that you're right when you say that '96 FIFA, the MLS was started because one of the conditions for having the World Cup in '94 is that America would start their own league, and that was a condition written by FIFA and the American Soccer Association. But the MLS at the beginning, they were just an embryo. They didn't know what to expect, and the fact that they were just going to go with franchises that they thought were going to put up the money to field teams. I think the saving on the MLS, you're right in one point, is that later on, as they were having some difficulty, they fluked it with Toronto. Toronto became a model franchise, Toronto FC. Okay, and I think that's when they blossomed. The MLS kind of blossomed. It was a natural progress in a business plan that with Toronto, other teams followed in, and that was Seattle, Vancouver. There were bastion franchises in the North American Soccer League. So I don't really want to pinpoint why MLS at the beginning was struggling and didn't have these franchises coming in. That was a natural progress that happened later on. But you gotta give credit. I think the point you're making, Robbie, I think is that the NSL we were pioneers. Okay, the NSL was an example to follow, learn from the mistakes, and move forward. And that's, I think, what the MLS did. Okay, they took the NSL and they tried to make it better so it wouldn't fail. And by that time in the 90s, the Americans and the Canadians have developed the games so much that a lot of Americans and Canadian players were all of a sudden flourishing from the ashes of the NSL. So it was a natural progress that happened. And we should be happy that MLS is becoming the league it's becoming, a major league. And this thanks to the NSL, I believe.
Yeah, but they don't do Canadian players any favors, Carmen. We're not equal. Our players are not equal to American players in status in that league.
But they've changed that too, Robbie. No, they've changed. That's been. I don't know the exact rule it is, but that's been changed now. And of course, you know that this is still an American league, and they try to basically develop their own national teams. But Canada is also profiting from that. Alfonso Davies is playing for Bayern Munich because he came from the academy of Vancouver. And a lot of other players are developing through the MLS and through the academies. And so, yeah, it's advantageous to the national team of America, of the US, but it's also advantageous. MLS is also a big advantage. We are where we are in Canada with some very good players because of the MLS. Let's face it. You know, Anthony Davis, Alfonso Davis wouldn't be around if it wasn't for the MLS. So so are many other players. Piat and all the players are playing in Europe and they're playing in the MLS, all the national team players, Canadian national team players. And I believe we go in the right direction for Canada and for the US to become a power of CONCACAF. I hope it will happen soon.
Well, that was my next question, Carmen, because as we're all talking about Canadian players then, as you were young Canadians then, and we're looking and we're admiring the young players of today in Alfonso Davies and Jonathan David and Kyle Larin and so many more who are now achieving successes in European leagues. Are we seeing maybe a golden generation of young Canadians breaking through for both their clubs and country? It seems to me that it's a very young Canadian national team that John Herdman has right now, but they're all very established young players, right? Is this?
It's happening. It's happening. It's happening because I believe because of the MLS, because of the NSL. Let's go back. We're going back from the ashes in NASL was the birth of the MLS. And the success that Canada is having with these players, and so is the US. A lot of them are the top players. Alfonso Davies is most expensive young players in the world. And this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the MLS, and if it wasn't the MLS happened because of the NSL. So it's a growth, it's an happening, it's an evolution that's happening. Paul, where are you, Paul?
No, just going back to Alf's original question, you mentioned about the North American Soccer League and the MLS. You hit it right on the nose off when you said they just grew too fast, too big. It was a matter, to me, it's all about the business models. The business model, the NASL, was not right. Okay, they had too much money. The players were making too much money. There weren't enough spectators to support that, and the teams that were doing well were the teams that had the big owners. Okay, whether it be MGM or Warner Brothers, but the rest of the teams didn't have these big owners, and eventually they couldn't sustain that league. And that was
and Paul, don't forget the TV money was huge.
And the MLS has done it right way. They grew slowly. Okay, like I said, there weren't any big superstars at the beginning, and if you look back in 20 years ago, the soccer wasn't very good at that time either, because that's some of the results of not wanting to get those, get the players, some international players and everything else. And so the league wasn't as good as it is right now. But now, and that's again because they're bringing in some good players. The fans are picking up, the money's there, and the league has been very successful, type of thing. And going now and getting to this, what we're talking about now, another reason why I think you're saying the MLS, because the MLS, the national team is doing well. I think too we have to give some credit to the grassroots. I said because. I mean, I wasn't involved much in soccer after I finished playing because my kids took up all my time between my son and hockey and everything else, and my daughter, and I was working in school, so I was coaching there, so I just couldn't get involved in soccer. But once I retired in 2012, I became involved with Woodbridge Soccer Club, and I'm amazed by the quality of I mean, I was working with the younger kids, from 9 years old to 13, mostly girls, but I saw the boys. The quality of the players, unbelievable at 7 years old, 8 years old. I didn't start playing till I was 11. Okay, I mean, that's when I started kicking my first ball at 10 years old or something like that, and with Westwood. These players at 7 years old, 6 years old, both feet, strike a ball like you wouldn't believe, take on players, their moves. And so it was inevitable that at some point, that now with the right structure, they need the right structure to continue to progress. Do we have the right structure? That's something I think there's, that people are going to debate in Canada throughout. I mean, I don't have the answers. I'm not sure I have the answers, but I know looking at these players, and that's just one club, all the clubs, all the main clubs in the GTA, that's the quality of the players they have. So they're there. Now, what happens to them at a certain point? I don't know. I have questions, but I don't have answers. And
Paul, you make a good point. I want to just jump in on what Paul is saying, and then I'll leave it with Robbie. But all of a sudden, even in Canada, that pyramid structure, it's happening because you got the community clubs are doing an amazing job for the girls and the boys to develop at the youth level. Okay, now all of a sudden, because of the World Cup, again, we have a Canadian soccer league, that strictly a Canadian league, right? And then the big jump, like it was for us, is the boys that go through the academy, Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, the three academies. They play soccer every day. They develop, and they're in a professional environment, and that's how you develop top-notch players. So the system all of a sudden is in place, and no wonder after 10 years of academies in Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, a bit less, all of a sudden we see players, Canadian players, going to Europe, and Alfonso Davies and playing in the MLS, and this would profit eventually. The national team will make a national team player. So it's something that all of a sudden, Robbie and I, the three of us, always talked with Alf in the past about a pyramid of play, to develop players. That's happening in North America right now, Canada and the US. And I think that eventually we're gonna challenge Mexican teams as a national team, and also at the club level. With Toronto FC, we're gonna see a North American CONCACAF champion coming from the MLS sooner than later. I believe the national team will eventually challenge the Mexican national team, and I think we're getting to that.
I wanted to pick up on that discussion, Carmine. I just want to remind all our viewers that you can interact with our guests. Please use the chat box to ask some questions. There are a couple that are coming in right now. We'll get to them, but I wanted to pick up on that point, Carmine, and ask all of you in terms of Canadian achievements. There have been few and far between over the years. Of course, we made it to the 1986 World Cup. We won the 2000 edition of the Gold Cup, and more recently, our women's women's national team has won Olympic bronze medals in the last two editions of the Summer Olympics. What do you think will be the next great Canadian achievement in soccer? Could it be as soon as this summer with our women in Tokyo, or could it be the Canadian men challenging to achieve another World Cup qualification in Qatar? Or as Carmine is mentioning, are we in a position to now challenge and perhaps even beat the top nations in our region, the United States and Mexico, on a more regular basis?
Well, I'm here. I think there's no doubt that we definitely made some steps forward with regards to the quality of our team, and the quality of certain stations on our team that can make a difference. So we go to goal with confidence. We go to goal with people that score regularly in the leagues that they play. And we have people in midfield positions. Paul was saying, when the North American Soccer League, we had most of the talent was at the back or in the middle. We also had some good goal scorers back then. But I think that, John Herdman has the pleasure of a very deep roster. And that roster, in my opinion, will continue to get deeper because being someone that runs a soccer club myself, I can tell you that they're looking at Canadian and American for sure, and Canadian as the new grounds for fertile soil to bring these players to European teams, as Alfonso did, and I think that they know that the talent base athletically is here, and all they need to do is get the raw material, and they'll be able to refine it. And I think that you'll see more and more teams coming over and looking at talent at the 13, 14-year-old, 15-year-old level, and I think that's where the development will be. I don't think that players on North American teams will develop as well as they will on those larger clubs in Europe that focus on making a soccer player from the minute he wakes up until the minute he goes to bed. And people need to appreciate that a soccer player is developed not only in what he does on the field, but how he comports himself off the field, his respect level, his learning level, and his willingness to absorb and go forward, and understand that even though he feels he may have been done wrong, that's all part of his learning process, and that's hard to do for individuals, especially the young generation who feel that they deserve as much of a chance as anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, Bobby, that you're making, is that young Canadian players, and there's a lot of players now, young players that I know of, that all of a sudden European clubs are looking at them. After Alfonso Davies and Davy, I always get confused between those two, and a few other that when Laren, I think, is in Turkey. So right. A few of the Canadian players, not as many as we would want, they all of a sudden they're going at a young age to Europe, because European teams are following all of a sudden North American players, young players. I know that I got a call from not long ago from Juventus. As you know, we made that connection with Juventus. And next thing I found out from the under-17, who you know, Bobby, what's his name? Francesco, the under-17 coach, Francesco, what's his name? I forget his last name. Pedone.
Yeah, Pedone, yeah.
He calls me and he's there, he wants to know that because of the Juventus scouts are looking at one of the young players at TFC, age 18, 19, okay? Because they see that the future of, European teams are looking also in North America to scout and get some young talent. So the talent, it's happening. It's as we speak. The talent, it's there because these players are being developed properly. All of a sudden, we have the right system in place. And this will, I think, will boast well for the national team. From John Erdman has a good pool of players all of a sudden. Only a few years ago, there weren't that many Canadian talent around, okay? Now, all of a sudden, we do have these players because they're playing in the MLS and they're playing in Europe. So, we see the national team and we see they're competing. I think we're still far back from, competing with the top teams like Mexico, Costa Rica, but, still, I think, behind Costa Rica, still behind the US, but we're catching up. And I hope that the coach, John Erdman and Mario Biello, with the Olympic team, he came one step close to beating Mexico. I mean, I saw the game. They weren't even in the game, not even close, but it was being played in Mexico. And, they came in fourth, I believe. Only 3 going to the Olympics. So we're knocking on the door. Slowly we're doing it. I've mentioned on the Gold Cup. The Gold Cup, Canada won the Gold Cup because of the ashes of the NSL. We developed with the national team because we played with Cruyff and Eusebio and McLeod and us, the 3 of us, and Stojanovic, Trenacher, and other players that were playing for the national team at the time, Lettieri, and I said Leonard Dutz, and so on. And I think the last success that Canada had at the national team level, to answer your question, was the Gold Cup, and that was because as a result of the North American Soccer League ashes. The last time we qualified for the World Cup was in Mexico. Again, that was a result of the NSL. I believe, hopefully, our national team will qualify next. Hopefully, we'll be there in 2022. Is it 22? No, when is it? 22, the next one? Mm-hmm. And hopefully that would be a great achievement. I think they got the tools, they got the coaching to hopefully qualify. That would be an amazing achievement. Then we know we're going to host 2026. And not to mention the women program. I mean, we're doing amazing at the women level too, because of the system that we have in place. Unfortunately, the women don't have a professional league to basically try to make it their profession. And, we're ahead of the game, but we're falling behind in that level, because in Europe, all of a sudden, they're having professional leagues at the woman level. So if we were top 4, top 5, I think right now we may be top 10 and at the women level, and we're going to fall behind unless there's going to be a women professional league coming soon. I hope that will become soon, because we need for the women program, that needs to happen for us to stay competitive and become top nation in football at the women level.
Certainly, yeah. We're coming up to the top of the hour, so we're almost running out of time. So I'll just leave you this last question for all of you to respond to. Carmen, you touched on it. World Cup 2026 is coming. It's a North American World Cup in that all 3 countries, Canada, the United States, and Mexico, will all host games. this should be a very important moment in soccer history for Canada, should leave a legacy. How can Canadian soccer take advantage of this opportunity to host the World Cup for the very first time in its history?
Paul.
No, go ahead, Rob.
Go ahead, Paul.
You go. You've got more. You're more involved in that than I have been in the last year. Go ahead.
Well, there's no doubt that come 2026, everything that we've been speaking about with the development of the Canadian player and the improvement in the national programs of both men and women would augur well for us to showcase that moment. As you asked, Alf, when is the next great Canadian moment? Wouldn't it be great if Canada would be able to to win a game or two or go through to the next round, because the team is now blossomed and is actually competitive and not afraid of competition, because every one of those players and every one of the stations on the team, including the people on the bench, because you don't win anything unless you have strong players in the back to come in for those who need a change. And when Canada has that type of depth, then they're going to be a team to be reckoned with, and I hope that could happen in Canada. I think we only get to host 10 games or so, right, in the first round, from what I understand. 3 games per 3 cities, or
right,
and then one quarterfinal. And I think that's what Canada gets to showcase. But I would think that by 2026 that we would have ramped up and put together a team that would be very competitive.
And just to add too, I mean, it's going to be game changer. To me, that's a game changer, because the eyes of the world are going to be on soccer in Canada. I mean, we're talking about the kids that are growing up now, they're going to be on that team or that are involved now. But when you have the eyes of the world and the attention that draws, you're talking about creating the next 3 generations of soccer players. I mean, and that of course is if they have, let's hope that they have a great showing, and as we've all said, they're definitely headed in the right direction. Okay, in terms of the quality of players that we're producing now. So I just think it's going to be an unbelievable time where, like, people are going to be eating, drinking, just living soccer for that whole period. And I just think it's going to be just an amazing time for soccer. And again, just to add to the growth, it's just going to be exponential, I think, after that, for Canada, for soccer, for the kids that are playing, not only the boys, even the girls, even the ladies, because again, it's enough. We know what happens when the Olympics are on, or when the World Cup is on, or the Euro Cup. Everything changes.
Our country rallies around, yeah.
Yes, and now it's going to be in Canada. You can say whatever games we have, and if we have a team does well, even if they don't, let's hope the team does well. And I think it's going to be just tremendous for the growth of soccer. And that's what happened in the States. I think it just took off when they were going to get the World Cup. They put the money into it. They went, and that's what the Americans do, right? They put everything, money, the attention, everything else. And look what's happened, once the United States hosted the World Cup. It just took off to everything. So let's hope that happens here in Canada too, even more than it is right now.
Great point, Paul. I don't know how much time we have left. There's very little time before the top of the hour, so I don't know if John would give us an idea of how much time we have left. But we do have a question that I wanted to kind of share with everybody that seems interesting, and it goes back to your days in the NASL. And it asks, you mentioned playing against Cruyff and Pelé. Were any of you guys given the job of covering such a player? And if so, what did you learn from that assignment? And it goes on to say that because there have been some questions with our current national team defense in that it's our weakness, whereas it used to be our strength. Anyone want to?
Well, I had, I remember with Washington, 1979, we made the playoffs, and we were playing Los Angeles. I think Robbie was with the team already, with the teammate, and we were supposed to be playing Los Angeles, and Bradley, the coach, said, Marcantonio, you're going to be marking. I played at that time more defensive midfield. So my task was to mark Johan Cruyff, who was with Los Angeles. He had just been signed that year from Barcelona, and to join his mentor and youth coach, Ajax, Nikos, was the coach at Barcelona. And when you're so close, and I think Paul also marked Johan, and you see the greatness of the player when you have a job to mark a great player. Because I know Trapattoni, I read about Trapattoni marking Pelé, and my job to mark Cruyff was basically, and Paul could testify to this, was basically me getting to find out firsthand how great the superstars are. And you try to contain, you try to, make sure that, you stay goal side, that he doesn't dribble you, that you don't, jump in and because next thing you know, he's gone and he could either score or set up a goal, So, I was good enough and lucky enough to contain him. The 2 games I played against him in Washington, in Los Angeles first, and then Washington. And then the next year we became teammates.
Yeah, just to carry on with Carmen, he's right. It was in Memphis that again the coach Charlie Cook came to me and said, your job again. Back then there was man-to-man marking. It's not so much like it is now zone type of thing. It was more man-to-man marking, and again it was Johan Cruyff was my assignment, and so obviously it was hard to sleep the night before type of thing, right? Knowing that you have to cover him, but just the greatness. I mean, apparently I had a good game type of thing, but they forget the point that trying to contain him, he's just, his first couple of steps, and Carmen would attest to it, are so unbelievable. At that point of his career, maybe he was a little bit slower, but his first 2, obviously his technical ability, but his first 2 or 3 steps, and a great play like that, that's all you need. All you need is a couple of seconds. And we had a great game because Memphis we weren't very successful in those 2 years that I was there. It was difficult to win games. And we're having a great game, but at the end of the game, he touches 2 balls, puts Tony Criscitelli through and Green through, and next thing you know, we lose 2-1. And again, I wasn't as lucky as Carmen. He had 2 assists that game, but it's hard to contain those kind of players because all they need is that. All I realize is that he needs just that 1 or 2 seconds because he's way ahead of the game in terms of where the ball's going to go, what's going to happen. He's way ahead of everybody. That's what I realized covering him type of thing, and he would sort of hide on the field. And next thing you know, boom, he would get the ball, and again, that's like Carmen says, it's a matter of containing, not getting sucked in, because again, he'll just burn you type of thing with that type of thing. So it's containing as much as you can. But I didn't do as good a job as Carmen that particular game, and we ended up losing 2-1. But they were overall a much better team at that point than we were.
Bob, you were fullback or center back for the majority of your career. What was maybe the most difficult assignment that you had against an opposing player?
Well, I tell you, I covered Giorgio Chinaglia, and I covered. Pelé, I wouldn't say I covered him, but at Varsity Stadium, which was the first game Carmen remember during the '76 Olympics, soccer was played in Toronto, and
July 7th.
We played the Cosmos in Toronto in that July 1st or 2nd day.
July 7th, the game was, Robbie. July 7th.
And that was another story for the book because Eusebio didn't play that game because he had an argument with Markovic the game before against Glasgow Rangers when there was a big kerfuffle on the field, and so Eusebio tried to hold Markovic back, but Markovic wanted to get at the referee, and then Markovic, for some reason, decided that he had to punish Eusebio, and he didn't play against the Cosmos. But I played against Pelé that day. I played against Giorgio. We lost 3-0. Giorgio scored twice and Pelé scored once. Our team was a little bit at 6s and 7s because of all the episodes I mentioned. I would just say as a defender, it is people don't realize that the defending is an art. A lot of people think it's a lesser position, but if you have defenders who are intelligent and credible and are able to win early battles in their matchups. And I think that's so important when in both of my colleagues will reflect on those moments when you're in those duels that, you have to win. You have to win those duels. And you have to keep your cool, and you have to communicate well as a defender as well. There's so much in becoming a great defender and inhibiting those great players from doing the things that make them famous. Because if you don't want them to have one of their great days against you. So on that particular day against that particular superstar, great player, you're underneath the microscope as well. And so there's a lot of pressure for you, and it's a great test for the player that you want to become. And I can remember on many occasions that's how I felt playing on that particular day. But the toughest guy I ever marked was Tommy Hutchison. Remember, Carmen? Tommy Hutchison.
Tommy was a good wing.
Tall winger from Seattle. He played with Coventry.
Was he a Scot? Was he?
He was a Scot, but he played in all of his career in England.
Uh-huh.
And Vujovic and Dragan Vujovic.
Oh, and Dragan Vujovic as well. Those are two guys. So they wouldn't be in the same category as Cruyff, Pelé, Maradona, but both of them gave me fits. Both of them.
Your head was spinning at the end of the game.
Vujo was a magician. Vujo is one of those. I mean, if you ever watched Dragan Vujovic play soccer, I would. If you wouldn't want to mark this guy, there's no way.
Robbie, the other great winger that we had the pleasure to play with, talking about NSL.
Yeah.
Romanovic. God bless his soul. I mean, one of the greatest dribbler forward that I ever played with.
I agree, Carmen. I agree.
And we're not talking about Cruyff, Maradona. We're talking about Romanovic that played in the Yugoslavian First Division. But this guy could play. He could dribble.
Those guys were all the Balkan players, Croatians, Slovenians, Serbs, the Montenegro. I mean, Savicevic was a great Montenegrin. I mean, I've always respected them. They have the Brazilian talent from Europe, and I always called them the Brazilians of Europe. So yeah.
Guys, one of our viewers, Mario Giancola, just wrote in and wants to ask this question: who stands out as one of the best defenders in Serie A today? Interested in your impressions.
Good question.
Right, you guys watch that much more night.
Right now, I would say Italian player, national team player that for a young man is doing amazing is Bastone of Inter. Bastone of Inter. Then obviously you got your Chiellini, that's probably top defender, and Bonucci, but Chiellini more overall in the last 10 years, I would say Chiellini, and then as a newcomer, I would put Bastone. Then you got Baresi, and you got some other good defenders of the past.
No, but it's funny, think about that question. Best defender in Serie A today, where once upon a time, Italians would lose their place at forward position. Now they're losing their place all over. We have so many players coming into Serie A, and the Italians are suffering, the nationalists. And I think that, if I was someone who was a decision maker in Italian soccer, I would try and give the Italian players a fighting chance on some of these teams.
Maybe just to add, maybe not an Italian player, but you talk about Juventus, Carmen. I think Delite's their best defender. Okay, I like the way he plays. He wins a lot of tackles. He anticipates, and right now, to me, he's playing much better than Chiellini and Bonucci. Mind you, Bonucci and Chiellini had great careers and are coming to their end, where Delite is 22 years old, whatever he is.
Well, 70 million euros later, you would think he's definitely one of the top defenders.
But I think he had a slow start, but right now, I like the way he's been playing, the last half of this year to everything. And when he's healthy too. He's
the future of the Juventus defense for sure. Yeah.
But I'm just saying, he defends well. I mean, he defends well.
I agree.
His anticipation.
He's one of the top. One of the top of Serie A for sure. You're right.
And the other team that I think we should mention is Atalanta, and mention them all over, because Atalanta, first of all, has the best youth development system in Italy, and they should be congratulated for that. And they've had that for a long time, Alfie. Secondly, the way they play now defensively and offensively, and without highlighting any one or two players, they're collectively, in my opinion, the best defensive team in Italy.
Well, they're a machine, Robbie.
Yeah.
Both, like you said, they're total soccer. And kudos, I said, their coach, Gasperini, is a top coach in Europe. I put him one of the top coaches with Guardiola in Europe for sure.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people would agree with that too. And I wanted to bring up probably one last question here, and this is from an acquaintance we all are familiar with, Tony LaFerrara, who says, thank you, Bobby, Paul, and Carmen, for your invaluable contribution to the growth of the game in Canada. And his question is, who is or was the best player you played with?
Okay, Tony first, because I want to say hi to Tony. So, Tony, thank you for the good words, and no question, the top player I played with is Johan Cruyff, no question. But and as a person, though, Eusebio came here at a different age and injuries and whatever. But as a person, from a human standpoint, Eusebio, as a player, from a footballer standpoint, Johan Cruyff.
Well, for me, I mean, with those two parameters, as a player and as an individual, I had a great respect for Helmut Kramers in Germany. Again, a former national player, came at a time, you know, an older age here again, but just a great individual. I mean, great family. I got to meet his family, type of thing, and he was a true. I mean, that's one thing I learned: the true professional Germans. They're even at that age. They were still took care of their bodies, played well. It's unbelievable, you know, how you talk about the Germans in terms of being excellent professionals. And like you're talking, Robbie, about earlier, you said about eating and the environment they create, eating and sleeping, soccer. And I learned so much from that German team. That's where I learned to play soccer. I realized that the game, when you're surrounded by great players, the game is so much easier to play. I mean, the game was so much easier for me to play in Calgary than it was in Memphis for 2 years, you know, because of, I mean, nothing, just, again, they're just different quality players that had come over at that particular team, that particular year. And the game was so much easier for a defender to play because, you know, we defended as a unit, we attacked as a unit. The game became so much simpler for me. I mean, I learned in 1 year, well, you know, it would have taken me, you know, it would have taken me 10 years to learn, type of thing. It was just, you know, just excellent. And we have to create that kind of environment here in this country where players are surrounded by this quality among them, that the game is so much easier to play. And I think we'll all prosper and be better off because of it.
Well, the player that I saw, I played against one game in 1978 in Tucumán, Argentina, was Diego Maradona. And
I thought you were going to say
he played for Argentina juniors at the time, and his two forwards were Barbas and Ramon Diaz. Both of them played in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you that on that particular day, in the first 22 minutes of the game, Diego Maradona had already scored a hat trick. We ended up losing 6-2 against Argentina juniors, and I had seen, in my opinion, the greatest soccer player of all time. I'd say that the best player that I ever played with, I agree with Carmen, was Johan Cruyff, and Carmen would agree with me. We learned so much from Johan just on the bus, going to games, going back from games, talking about the game in dressing rooms. When we socialized together, we were always talking about the game. The guy was a genius, and he was also very caring for the development of both Carmen and myself, I can tell you.
And Carlos Alberto for you, as a teammate,
yes,
as a defender.
Well, you know, Carmen, I'm so lucky to have played with so many great players that sometimes I don't give them, you know, the mention that they deserve. You're right. Carlos Alberto would also be right at the top, as was Giorgio Chinaglia, for me, my best friend in New York. So these people, and Paul's right, you know, when you get somebody like Helmut Kramers, who you know what he's gone through, the pedigree that he brings to you, the reputation that he has, and then he's there with you explaining things that you had been explained to by other people, except now it's being explained by these legends, and it reinforces everything, and it solidifies it in your DNA. It really does.
Thank you, Robbie, for those notes, and thank you all for joining me today. It was a special treat for me to talk to all of you once again and reflect on some wonderful memories and kind of look ahead to what the future of Canadian soccer holds for us. And I hope our viewers enjoyed this conversation. So, John, I'll give it back to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Alf, and the whole group of you. That was a phenomenal conversation. Brought back a lot of memories. I was lucky enough to play with Paul there at York, and it was just great to hear some of the stories. You know, I hope that you know, young players, you know, take in your experience and you guys share that with the young players. You know, there's something special I think sometimes Canadian soccer forgets about some of our greats like you guys, and should maybe tap into your experience a little bit more. But I hope that today, you know, your experience was shared. We're going to put this on our YouTube channel with the NSCAC and share it with people around. And Alf, of course, thanks again for hosting. Phenomenal job as usual.
My pleasure.
And for any of you that are interested in become a member of the National Soccer Coaches Association of Canada, just go to nscac.ca and you can get all the information, and you'll be able to see all the behind the bench sessions we've done in the past, as we're trying to bring some of the greats from the past into our library of great webinars. Again, guys, thank you very, very much. Really appreciate it. Hopefully we'll see you all again soon. Stay safe and take it easy.
Good to see
Likewise.
everyone.
Thanks, John. See you. See you later.
Thank you very much.
Right.
See you, boys.
Okay, bye.
Bye, Karen.
Ciao.
Bye, Paul.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.